Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy, episode 263. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Sun Tzu and how I believe he is shaking his head over Syria. And the news, every little bit that you hear about it coming out of Syria is so frustrating. I told my students today, seventh and eighth graders, in part to justify my anti government positions and also to discuss inflation. We talked a little bit about Syria and how it's always interesting how people never put, sort of a correlation or even causation between all of this war and the constant inflation that we're seeing, which results, of course, in increased prices. So we had fun talking about that. Uh, and yeah, so that's what we talked about today. And so on the way home, I thought, it reminds me of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And I've talked about The Art of War, Sun Tzu, in episode 9, 45, 46, and more recently in episode 204. But Sun Tzu was a Chinese general who lived about 2,500 years ago. Tzu, right? So Sun Tzu, right, is his title. It's not his last name, just so you know. And he wrote Art of War. So he was a very renowned traveling general, mercenary general, which is basically how things happened back in the day. You couldn't maintain a large army, and so you would hire people to do your fighting when it was time to do the fighting. And so Sun Tzu was renowned to be one of those who you really want to hire if you can. So I just wanted to quote a couple of things from his book. And the book is very short. It's 13 chapters, but each chapter is just a couple of pages. And the reason is because Chinese is a character-based language. It's not an alphabet. And so we're not really reading words, we're reading rich symbols, which have a lot of meaning. Now, I've talked about this before, but because of the many different ways that you can interpret words, even by the people who speak it, right, there's a lot of meaning, even beneath the meaning. And that's kind of what makes, at least Chinese, very complicated at the same time, very rich. And so, although it is a very short book, it's a pretty deep one. It's worth reading, especially if you love literature and interpretation of things. You can spend all day doing it, and I would have to restrict my lectures to just 4 days for the 13 chapters. I'd have to limit myself because we had to talk about other things. But anyway, so in chapter 2, it's called Waging War. So, chapter 2, the title is Waging War. And the basic gist of it is that war is really expensive. And so, the first four lines or verses, they look like verses, talk about bankruptcy and how protracted war leads to bankruptcy, which then makes you vulnerable to your enemies. And a lot of the hard money, libertarian-ish guys always talk about this, how the bankruptcy is the true threat to national security. Line 10 of chapter 2, it says, poverty of the state, exchequer, causes an army to be maintained by contributions from a distance. Contributing to maintain an army at a distance causes the people to be impoverished. And we can see that today. This constant war is leading to poverty for the average person. Chapter 3, attack by stratagem, by strategery, as Bush would say, by strategy. And the first two lines talks about supreme excellence, supreme excellence. So it goes like this. In the practical art of war, the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So, too, it is better to recapture an army entire than to destroy it, to capture a regiment, a detachment, or company entire than to destroy them. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Why is it? Because back in those days, when you raised an army, you're basically telling all your peasants, your farmers, your artisans to temporarily join the army. And so if you kill the opponent's army, you literally are destroying the economy of that country, and which will lead to poverty, not only for yourself, but also for the country that you are attacking. And so, what is better is to get the enemy to surrender without losing a single life. That is supreme excellence. That is the mark of being really, really good. But you never hear that today. All of the generals and politicians are hell bent on killing, body counts, right? Making sure that a lot of people die, which is the opposite of supreme excellence. It's sheer stupidity. And the fact that a lot of people in America think that America can pull this off is actually a lot of arrogance, right? So then we look at line 6 in chapter 3. Therefore, the skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. You want to pull off victory without large loss of life, without destroying infrastructure, right? Don't destroy the cities. That's where people live. That's where everyone has accumulated their wealth. Don't destroy it, right? Preserve it. And then you carry on from there. And obviously, one of the first things that the US does first when you attack a country is destroy the infrastructure, right? That's the strategy of the arrogant American military. Chapter 4, tactical dispositions. And he talks about a clever fighter or a skillful fighter in line 11. So reading from line 11 to 15. What the ancients called a clever fighter is one who not only wins, but excels in winning with ease. Hence, his victories bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage, right? Because he wins too easily. Everyone says, anyone could have done it, right? It has nothing to do with skill, with his planning, right? It's just luck, right? Anyone could have done it. The opponent was weak, right? Line 13. He wins his battles by making no mistakes. Making no mistakes is what establishes the certainty of victory, for it means conquering an enemy that is already defeated. And it resonates with me by this whole not making mistakes, because in sports, right, like tennis, there's unforced errors. And in professional football, I know you capitalize on the errors or the mistakes of your opponent. And so you could be equally matched. But if one side is always making mistakes or committing penalties, then you have an edge. Don't make any mistakes and make sure that you win. So, line 14, it says, hence the skillful fighter puts himself in a position which makes defeat impossible and does not miss the moment for defeating the enemy. Line 15. Thus, it is that in war, victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and then afterwards looks for victory. Right? And so what are we saying here? That if you planned and prepared, right, then you look for the battle after you already won. The person who is going to lose, especially if you're going up against someone who is thinking like Sun Tzu with the art of war, you're defeated already. And now you're looking to fight. And then once the fight has already started, you're going to look for victory. And isn't that classic America, right? They fight first, bomb first, be hostile first, and then try to figure out how they're supposed to win, right? That's what it looks like to me, right? And even if they say there's a strategy, there is no strategy. The problem with this approach, right, is that if you win easily, even to the point where you win so easily that the battle never takes place, right, your opponent sees just how ill-matched they are, mismatched you are, that he has no hope of winning, so he surrenders before there's a fight. That kind of situation means that there is no glory for the general, for the leader, for the person who is, you know, basically trying to get the attention and approval of the masses, of voters, of large donation giving lobbyists, special interest groups. There's no glory, right? But actually, if you think about it, there is more glory with the person who preserves peace. And that's what we're talking about, being able to win the war, win the battle without any bloodshed, right? And even before it even begins, that is called preserving peace. In today's world, the person who preserves peace has no glory. Isn't that crazy? So you got Donald Trump, who potentially could be making lots of mistakes, depending on how things move forward once he takes office. During his first presidency, he didn't start any new wars. I mean, he had some unfortunate missile attacks and assassinations, but compared to a lot of the other recent presidents, not even close. And so who's the president that gets demonized, who's called a Nazi, who's called anti-American? It's that guy. And so you can see Sun Tzu's ideas just playing out. And so if we are not going to glorify someone who prevents wars, like Donald Trump, then who do we celebrate? Who do we make the statues for? We make them for the worst generals, the bloodiest generals and leaders of our country. Abraham Lincoln, the bloodiest president, right? Civil War happened under his watch. And so many people died that didn't have to. And yet there are monuments, there are temples, there are statues for him. He's on the currency. We celebrate the worst generals, the, the battlefield generals and presidents, right? We don't care about the people who avoided war, preserved peace, and then brought prosperity to this country. Don't like them, don't care. At least that's what most Americans are socialized to believe, right? That the boring presidents are the presidents who did nothing, who didn't fight a war, right? And rumor had it that Biden wanted to be a wartime president. Well, he got his wish, and then his legacy is going to be bankruptcy and controversy. There are a couple AI plot-driven movies, TV shows. There's Person of Interest was a TV show that ran a few years ago, and the premise was one of the principal characters developed an AI, And this AI could, with because it was all seeing and could collect all the data in the world, it could make predictions as to what will happen in the future, right? This is scientific determinism. I've talked about this before, but now in AI, you begin to see it in movie plots as well. So, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is about the entity, which is basically an AI who goes through, right, predictive analysis, runs through every possible future scenario, and then nudges people to go one way or the other so that its favored and desired outcome is achieved. Our government does not have AI. Our government probably is saying, oh, we're smarter than AI, right? Even if you use basic game theory, right? And I've talked about game theory before, but basic game theory by a ex-humanities professor can figure out that this will not end well. We have currently in charge of this country people who believed that no one would notice Kamala Harris was a wine mom. And now those same people are planning the strategy for the military. That is not going to go well. And it's weird. I see people who realize that Harris was an alcoholic, okay, possible drug user. But when it comes to military and the war, they're all in, right? It's as if one doesn't have anything to do with the other, sort of like inflation and war. They have nothing to do with each other, right? And that's how Americans think. That's how we've been socially conditioned to think. It was so much fun for me to be able to re-educate all those college students how to rethink everything, that all those things which they thought were independent and unrelated to each other, they were all connected. And you begin to see those light bulbs go off. It was pretty cool. And now with my seventh and eighth graders, because most of them are more concerned about puberty, some of it, most of what I say really, they don't care. But some people do. And I'm hoping that they remember and that they become better adults than the people that we're seeing today. We got to remember, right, that war is never the answer. Freedom is. It's so much cheaper to allow for freedom, for people to have the right to self determination, to be able to make free choices and not be limited and restricted by the authoritarians who live here in America. You got Biden saying, we will rebuild Syria, while post Hurricane America, post like wildfire Hawaii is still, trying to get by with $700. What is that? And people, we got to realize that we have to start celebrating those people who keep us out of war, right? Right now, people who promote peace, they're called isolationists, right? They're mocked. They're you know, they're made fun of. They're called cowards. No, this is the opposite of what is truly good and valuable. We have to tone down all of this rhetoric of war. I forget who was saying it, but right now, this is the most dangerous time in recent US, Russia, Soviet Union history, because at least during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a hotline between the White House and the Kremlin. Right now, there's nothing. No one has talked to each other since probably Donald Trump. And so this is a real threat. No one is keeping each other in the loop of what's going on. This is insane. We need more people who understand the art of war, right? That is, and the way I interpreted it and explained art of war, the creative alternatives in competition, right? That's what the art of war is. War is competition, right? Conflict that arises from competition. So what's art? Creatively fighting and winning at competitions, right? That's what life is all about, the art of war. We need more people who understands this, that the basic goal of life should be prosperity, flourishing, not continuous war, to be brainwashed and socialized by a select few people who are warmongers, who are blood hungry, bloodthirsty, and who really don't care about the rest of us, right? We need people who understand the benefits of freedom, free trade. We need people like that. And so hopefully you will also uh, take seriously this message of peace and examine your enemies, right? The people who are standing on the other side of this war, right? Who are in favor of war, and come up with strategies to try to get those people also to realize and understand that war is never the answer, never is. It's actually the gateway to even many more problems, but rather freedom. Freedom is the answer. And that's it for today. Again, I apologize for my voice. It is getting better. So hopefully soon I'll be back to my normal self. Talk to you guys next time.